Welcome back. We'll now switch gears to security situation in the Northwest. A few days ago, the governors in that region, in collaboration with the UNDP, had come together to hold a peace and security summit to find a way to restore peace as much as possible so that the people can have lives and livelihood back on track. We've been joined in the program to further discuss on some of the conversations that ensued that particular day by a security consultant and the CEO of Beacon Consulting and Intelligence Limited, Mr. Kabiru Adamu. Mr. Adamu, thank you for coming on the program as always. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Just before we head to the Northwest, let's just have your take on the publication by Amnesty International as to the record of casualties, attacks in over 50 communities. They say 135 attacks in over 50 communities that has led to over 2,600 fatalities, and as a result, over 400,000 people now in IDP from January last year, I think, to February this year. What's your immediate reaction to what this says about the state of security?
Yeah, as you know, my organization does publish these types of reports where we show fatalities and then kidnap for ransom. And so the report is not surprising to me. I only worry a little bit about the consequences of isolating one location in Nigeria and then putting it out there and invariably emphasizing the notion that there is either an ethnic or sometimes even a religious component to the conflict. Every international organization has certain principles, and I know one of them is the principle of do no harm. So I really wonder sometimes if Amnesty International does take that into consideration. The conflict that we're seeing in Nigeria affects different states, different locations, and so when you isolate just one and put it forward without necessarily highlighting the fact that other locations are also being affected by that type of conflict and fatalities, you are invariably, unfortunately, either enforcing or reinforcing a notion that anyone who doesn't want to do harm would do. And that's the major, I would say, grouse I have with that report by Amnesty International.
Okay, let's now move to what's been playing out in the summit, and some questions I have at the back of my mind to ask you when I listen to what was said. So if you look at things like insecurity, out-of-school children, multi-dimensional poverty, a lot is more domiciled, or the epicenter is mostly in the north and all of that. And the northern governors, northwest governors have now said they want to do something. So my question is, this has always been there for a while. Is this an institutional crisis or just lack of brutal honesty to be able to attack this situation and bring it to the fore and solve it?
Okay, so just to give a bit of context of what we're dealing with in the Northwest, 7 states with the probably the most populous region in the country, and based on the last report that Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited put out, where we saw 1,090 persons being killed in the month of May. Now, of that 1,090, 21% were from that region, from the Northwest region. And then for abduction, we recorded 1,118. Now, 54% of that 1,118 affected the Northwest region. When we looked at the 774 local governments in Nigeria, 6 of the worst affected local governments in terms of insecurity were from the Northwest region. When we looked at the states that were worst affected by insecurity in the country, for the first 10 that we counted, in the first 6, the 5 out of the first 6 were from the Northwest region. Only Borno State was included in that first 6 outside of the other 5 that were from the region. So clearly, the need for addressing the security challenge in the Northwest region is more than ever important right now. if we're going to improve security in Nigeria, especially the other components of security. If you notice, the conference is speaking about the nexus between insecurity, peace, and then development. So if we're going to address the insecurity challenge in Nigeria, perhaps there is no other region that is more important than the Northwest, given the statistics that I've mentioned. We can speak about the out-of-school children. We can also speak about the drug addiction. We can speak about the porous borders that exist in that region, the weapons proliferation. So the conference is actually timely. And I'm also quite delighted by the stakeholders that came together. You've mentioned that the UNDP, but beyond the UNDP, the German government was there, the Netherlands, they were there, and then of course the federal government was more or less, the opening remark was given by the Vice President. The President was supposed to be there, where he was represented by the Vice President. And then of course our traditional rulers were there, religious leaders were also there. And not just that, across the political spectrum, if you look at the 7 states, there are 3 political parties that are governing those states in those regions. And they came together without that political divide and spoke as one. So I'm quite delighted at the commitment that I've seen during the conference. Of course, when we go further, we can speak about the technical sessions that were held and then the nature of the issues that came up, that I also feel were discussed in a frank manner and that would allow, hopefully, progress, as the decisions of the conference are reeled out.
All right, Mr. Kabir, I would like you to go straight to that frank conversation, because I listened to the Sultan, a monarch who to me looked like he was tired of the talk shop. He was tired of all of this summit. He just wants the problem solved. So what exactly was said in those sessions where cameras were not on, if they are to be shared publicly, that we need to know so that we can begin to see results? And how soon shall we see this result? Because all of this insecurity and all the negative data is covering things like the agricultural potential, the mineral potential, the alternative energy potential. We can go on and on.
So there were, I think, 6 sessions that were held. And the first session covered the farmer-herder violence. It looked at the 2 constituencies. What is the historical perspective of the farmer-herder violence? What are the manifestations of the current issues around farmer-herder violence? What has it triggered? And then how have the various states been handling them? Were there good lessons to learn from either of the states? If you notice, of the 7 states, Jigawa and to an extent Kano have relatively lower security challenges than the other 5 states. So how have they managed that issue in particular, the farmer-herder violence? The second one was what was called balancing the acts, exploring kinetic and non-kinetic strategies. Of recent, the government has divided its security approach into the kinetic and non-kinetic. So which ones have worked, which ones haven't worked? Is there a way to have a hybrid? Or if we're not having a hybrid, which one should be more important than the other? What are the root causes of the insecurity? How can addressing the root causes, as an example, support the development of both security and peace, and then, of course, development that would follow? The third one is socioeconomic development. In other words, advancing livelihoods and food security. So it looked closely at the livelihoods that have been destroyed. People's professions, as it were, farmers, name them, are all being affected. Youths are migrating from the north to other parts of the country in search of livelihoods. How will that be brought back? That looked at it, that issue closely. The fourth one is ending kidnap for ransom. Like I told you, 54% of the kidnap for ransom incidents in the country affected that region. So it looked closely at that issue. What is the ecosystem involved in the kidnap for ransom industry? What can be done? Are there any good practices that can be embedded or that each of the governments in the region can embrace and implement to help them reduce the kidnap for ransom situation in the region? Then the fifth one is sustainable financing, which looked at navigating paths to economic resilience and environmental sustainability in the Northwest. So it looked at the impact of climate change, as well as other aspects of sustainable finance and land titling as an example. How can that support financing and several other components of that? And then the last one that was looked at is it was a closed door session between the UNDP and the other UN system, and then the 7 governors. And I'm told that one of the decisions
if I may butt in, my apologies, if I may butt in because of time. We cannot have this conversation without talking about the role of the governors. And the question is, are these governors? I know literally all of them, if not most of them, are new governors, barely 1 year in office. Most of the governors from the Northwest. Are they doing enough beyond short-term measures to be able to restore confidence in the people and literally transform the fortunes of the people economically? Because I know for a fact, by the record we have from budgets, we know that Zamfara, for instance, under Matawale, former governor of the state, in 2022, was not able to raise IGR up to 10 billion naira. I think about 6 billion. Kebbi, under Atiku Bagudu, also former governor Bagudu, could not raise IGR more than 8 billion naira. That's how abysmal the numbers were in those particular states. And now these new men are in charge. What are you seeing that should give the people of these states and other states confidence to say, if economic situation is driving insecurity, what are they seeing now that can say, okay, it can maybe reduce it to a minimal level?
Like you rightly, I can't speak on behalf of the governors, but I can tell you what I'm seeing, and I can also tell you what was discussed and what is being envisaged. In particular, the governor of Zamfara State did provide data to show how he was able to increase IGR. I can't remember the exact figure now, but everybody at that conference was actually surprised given the level of insecurity. So you are in the media, you can check out if what he said is correct. I also know that the governor of Jigawa State did put out data to indicate that is an area that his government is working critically on. What I saw with this crop of governors is, I would call it fresh, and I would also describe it as refreshing. The messaging they were sending, and the UN emphasized that. In particular, the UN representative in Nigeria cited the fact that hope is being restored in that region by this singular action for governors to dedicate 48 hours, traditional rulers, 48 hours, ministers, 48 hours, together discussing an issue that not only affects them, but affects the entire country. And then, like I explained to you when I mentioned the 5 technical sessions that were held, approaching the 3 components of the conference, which is insecurity or security, peace, and then development. I think they deserve the support of every Nigerian. Of course, there are, if you recall, the 2 of probably some of the richest persons in Nigeria from that region, Dangote and Bua. So I'm hoping that stakeholders like that too would come into the conversation so that all of these 5 components will be looked at critically, and then the drivers of insecurity, especially the poverty level and the several other economic challenges that affect the region, will be looked at critically and addressed so that the components that allow the structural deficiencies for insecurity to continue to thrive will be addressed at that very granular level.
So in coasting home, let's talk about the issue of banditry and all the shades of insecurity that we've seen in that region. How much has ethnicity and religion played a role? Because the Zamfara State governor had mentioned the fact that, look, he had even had people negotiating with these bandits, and without his knowledge, it looks like there has to be some level of proactive measure to put people in charge to make sure that the right things are done in case they are being treated with case glove. What are you seeing from an expert's point of view in addressing the issue of banditry to the core? The president talked about it, that you cannot take away foreign money when it comes to the issue of when it has to do with these mineral resources and banditry and all of that.
So in simple terms, Jeffrey, there has been divisions at the federal and at the state level. And we know that those divisions have been publicly spoken about by at least 2 governors. But this is not the time to speak about divisions. And this wasn't emphasized at the conference. It wasn't a place of lamentation. It was a place to talk about solutions. It's a place to talk about the way forward. And that's what I would do. In spite of those divisions, I think this is an opportunity. The renewed hope agenda of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and for me that is the Bible or the Quran for which I would measure the performance of the administration. In that document, it spoke about creating frameworks for addressing the security challenges in the 6 geopolitical regions. And I see an opportunity here, an opportunity that has been gifted to the administration. So I'm hoping the administration would take advantage of that opportunity and start by using the Northwest as a model for the evolvement of that framework. The Office of the National Security Advisor, the Minister of Defense that were represented at that conference should take advantage of this golden opportunity that has been presented to them by both the international community and the governors of the Northwest to now ensure that there is an involvement of a framework for addressing not just the banditry challenge. I can tell you that the focus of that conference on banditry identified the sources of the banditry, the bandit commanders, and not only that, Jeffrey, you must bring me back to this studio to complete this conversation.
I promise. I promise. I will look for some other time because we're totally out of time.
You kept me waiting 2 days ago for 1 hour. So you must compensate me.
My apologies. I promise I'll do my best to bring you back and ensure you ventilate your thought as much as possible. But I must apologize. Thank you for coming on the program. Mr. Kabiru Adamu, security consultant and CEO of Beacon Consulting and Intelligence Limited, thank you for your perspective. We wish the Northwest the very best.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzongo. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Good night.